The world seemed to be spiraling into madness. It was 1940, shortly after the Second World War began, and the German forces were advancing relentlessly through Europe. Far away in Namibia's capital, Windhoek, two German geologists, Henno Martin and Herman Korn, sat in growing distress as they listened to their radio. The war's reach extended even to their remote corner of Africa. Germans were being detained in internment camps on suspicion of being Nazis, and they knew it was only a matter of time before they too were taken. One evening, as they sat on their porch pondering their fate, the two men shared their concerns. They were scientists, uninterested in war, and the thought of being imprisoned simply for their nationality was unbearable.
You know, we once joked about hiding in the desert if a war ever broke out.
Henno turned to him, surprised. It was true. They had mentioned it in passing, not thinking it would ever come to this. But could they really pull it off? The war might drag on for years.
What about Otto?
Henno asked, glancing at their loyal dog. Herman smiled as Otto wagged his tail enthusiastically.
We'll take him, of course. He's part of the team.
Otto had always accompanied them on their geological expeditions into the desert. This time would be no different. Resolutely, they decided to act. The Namib Desert, with its vast expanse and hidden canyons, would become their refuge. They would rely on the wilderness to keep them safe until the war ended. Within 4 days, they had gathered everything they could possibly need. They packed essential supplies, dried and canned food, tea, coffee, sugar, and jam. Alongside these basics, they included a few indulgences: chocolate and brandy, cooking gear, sleeping bags, a tarpaulin, clothing, sewing materials, and a first aid kit were carefully added. For the truck, they packed fuel, tools, and spare parts. Above all else, they brought their radio and their guns. The radio, powered by the truck's battery, would keep them informed about the war's progress and let them know when it was safe to return. Their guns, though not ideal for hunting, as rifles had been confiscated, were critical for survival, as their food supplies would need to be supplemented by hunting. Once the truck was loaded, they set off, choosing a route that would be difficult to trace. Few people knew the Namib Desert as intimately as they did. Their destination was a secluded canyon deep in the wilderness. The Namib Desert stretches along Namibia's western coastline, a stark and unforgiving landscape. Its northern coast, the Skeleton Coast, earned its name from the countless shipwrecks that left survivors stranded with no food or water, condemned to perish under the harsh desert sun. In some parts of the desert, towering dunes shimmer in hues of rust and orange, beautiful but inhospitable. However, there are other areas where rocky terrain and deep canyons offer precious waterholes. These rare spots of life were their best chance for survival. Driving along treacherous paths, Henno and Herman reached the top of the Kisib Canyon. From their vantage point, they gazed upon a harsh and dramatic landscape of jagged rocks, sheer cliffs, and deep gorges. Far below, the canyon's sandy floor stretched out like an alien world.
They won't find us here,
Herman said with quiet conviction. It was comforting to feel safe at last, though the desolation around them was also daunting. This was a land of extreme isolation, where even the hardiest creatures struggled to endure. How would they fare in such an unforgiving wilderness? It was too late to retreat. Leaving their truck parked atop the cliffs, Henno and Herman descended into the canyon, following a zebra trail in search of water and a safe place to live. The riverbed they encountered was dry, the result of a rainless year, but they were relieved to find several water holes. To their surprise and delight, one of the pools held carp, plump and lively. Using his hands, Herman cornered and caught one in the muddy water. It was their first catch, and they wasted no time lighting a fire to cook and savor it. As they explored deeper into the canyon, they stumbled upon an overhanging rock that formed a natural shelter. It provided enough protection to serve as a makeshift home. Over the next 2 days, they ferried supplies from their truck to the cave and made it as comfortable as possible. To ensure their truck wouldn't be spotted, they carefully concealed it beneath an overhanging cliff. Despite their efforts, hunger gnawed at them. Their limited rations, consisting of a daily breakfast of flour mixed with water and a spoonful of jam, were insufficient. Desperation pushed them to seek additional food sources. Fishing, which had seemed promising, turned out to be more difficult than expected. The initial stroke of luck with the carp was not repeated, and their handmade wire hooks yielded only frogs. With growling stomachs, they decided to hunt. On their way into the canyon, they had noticed tracks left by wild cattle, a bull, a cow, and a calf. To their delight, they soon came across the bull grazing on the canyon floor. The challenge was how to approach it without startling it.
I'll circle back with Otto and the shotgun to drive him toward you. You take the pistol and get ready.
The plan seemed sound. Henno moved cautiously, making sure not to alarm the massive animal. But as he inched closer, the bull caught his scent and charged. Reacting quickly, Henno fired the shotgun directly at its face, but the pellets barely slowed it down. At the last moment, Henno scrambled onto a rocky ledge, narrowly avoiding being gored. Herman, seeing the danger, took his chance and fired his pistol. The shot struck the bull behind the ear, and it collapsed, but only momentarily. As Herman and Henno approached, the bull sprang up again. Otto, excited but unprepared for the bull's ferocity, attacked its nose. The bull tossed its head, flinging Otto aside. Herman fired again, hitting the bull behind the ear once more. The creature dropped, but rose again, weaker this time, yet still defiant. Out of bullets and shaken by the ordeal, the two men retreated.
We'll need more ammunition and supplies. We'll have to camp here until we deal with him.
They returned to their cave for ropes, knives, and their sleeping bags. Back at the site, they tried once more to finish the bull. Despite firing 2 more bullets, they couldn't locate its heart amidst its enormous frame. Their inexperience in slaughtering such a large animal left them frustrated and ashamed. Finally, they devised a plan. They secured a rope around the bull's horns and tied it to a tree, immobilizing it. With heavy hearts, they ended the bull's life by slitting its throat. The ordeal left them shaken but relieved. That night, they feasted on fresh meat, the first real meal in days. The next challenge was preserving the rest of the carcass in the unforgiving desert heat. They painstakingly carved the animal into strips, drying some to make biltong and smoking the rest over a low fire. It was a trial and error process, but eventually they succeeded. For many days to follow, their meals consisted entirely of wild bull. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Survival in the desert was proving to be a brutal, relentless test of their resolve. The killing of the bull marked Henno and Herman's first real brush with the brutal realities of survival in the wild. Hunting turned out to be a cruel and exhausting endeavor, far removed from any romantic notions they might have held. They soon discovered that their limited resources left no room for mercy. Many of their bullets only injured their targets, forcing them to track wounded animals for hours or even days. Sometimes, the prey escaped entirely. Other times, they had to wait for it to weaken and collapse before delivering the final blow. Wasting precious ammunition on a quick, humane kill was simply not an option. Living on a monotonous diet of meat quickly grew tiresome. Desperate for variety, the men devised an inventive way to catch carp from the waterhole. Using tamarisk branches and pairs of their underpants, they fashioned a makeshift net, which they dragged through the water together. The method worked, providing them with a brief respite of fish dinners. But even this solution was temporary. The waterhole was drying up, and the fish were disappearing. Worse, they soon realized they had competition. Night after night, the carp were being poached by an unseen predator. Footprints around the pond revealed the culprit, a hyena. Furious, Henno declared,
I'm not letting him steal our fish. I'll shoot him.
You won't get close enough. He'll smell you coming. And shooting in the dark? You'd waste a bullet.
But Henno was determined. He carried his sleeping bag to the waterhole and spent the night on watch. Nothing happened. Returning to the cave empty-handed, he was greeted by Herman's teasing smile and a cup of coffee. Annoyed, Henno returned to his post the next evening. This time, he heard the hyena's eerie howls, bone-chilling, wild, and unmistakable. Gripping his shotgun, Henno aimed blindly toward the source of the noise and fired. The howling turned to a wounded yelp, then stopped altogether. Satisfied, Henno rolled over in his sleeping bag and slept soundly. At dawn, he followed a peculiar drag trail left by the injured hyena. It appeared the animal could no longer use its hind legs. He traced the path until he found the creature huddled under an acacia tree. Not wanting to waste another bullet, Henno resorted to stoning it. It was a harrowing and prolonged struggle before the hyena finally succumbed. Exhausted but victorious, Henno skinned the animal and brought its pelt back to the cave. This time, Herman refrained from mocking him. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Henno and Herman adapted as best they could to the changing seasons, each day blending into the next. The carp pond eventually dried up, leaving them without that source of food. The lack of variety in their diet led to severe vitamin deficiencies, which caused debilitating headaches. To counter this, they began drinking more blood and eating raw meat. Always resourceful, they even crafted sausages using the blood and intestines of a gemsbok. Salt and water, indispensable for survival, also began to run low. Like the animals they shared the desert with, the men were forced to move in search of sustenance. They trekked through the blistering canyons, enduring thirst and hunger until they discovered new waterholes and salt deposits. On one such journey, they sought shelter from the oppressive heat under a shaded rock face. The spot was popular with animals, and the ground was teeming with sand ticks. As they rested, Herman suddenly winced and shook his hand.
I think a tick bit me.
Within moments, he began to sway and collapse. Herman was pale and sweating, a strange rash spreading rapidly over his body.
My head.
Herman groaned, slumping to the ground. His condition deteriorated quickly, and he began to vomit violently. Henno frantically searched the ground for the offending tick. When he found it, Henno was horrified. The parasite was engorged with old, blackened blood, clearly the source of Herman's sudden illness. Blood poisoning had set in, and Herman was now incapacitated.
My vision is fading.
His words were enough to send Heno into a panic. Without hesitation, Heno made an incision on the tick bite and packed it with permanganate of potash, an antiseptic. It was a desperate measure, the only one he could think of. Herman, now almost blind and barely able to stay upright, leaned heavily on Heno as they stumbled into a small nearby cave. There, they hunkered down, waiting anxiously for the symptoms of the poisoning to ease. It wasn't until late the next day that Herman regained enough strength to stand. The close call served as a sobering reminder of just how precarious their existence was in the harsh wilderness. As time passed, the challenges shifted. Extended droughts forced the pair to abandon their original camp in search of water. They moved from one site to another, settling wherever there was enough water to sustain them. Occasionally, rain brought the desert alive, filling the barren landscape with new growth and wildlife. Heno marveled at the raw power of flash floods and the breathtaking sight of thousands of springbok grazing in the revitalized plains. Through it all, their loyal companion Otto never wavered. Despite being gored twice by a gemsbok, the dog remained enthusiastic about hunting. Like his human companions, Otto adapted to the unforgiving environment, showcasing the resilience of all creatures in the desert. Yet, the relentless demands of survival began to wear on them. Food became harder to find, and hunger gnawed at them constantly. The second dry season left them so weak that even hunting became an ordeal. In desperation, Heno pounced on a large lizard he spotted darting into the rocks. Grabbing it by the tail, he managed to haul it out. Later, he noted that the lizard's meat, white and firm, tasted like a mix of chicken and salmon. It provided 2 much-needed meals. But then Herman's health began to deteriorate rapidly. Pains in his back spread to his legs, neck, and head. His condition worsened to the point where he couldn't hunt or even move much. Heno tirelessly hunted for food, feeding Herman raw game, but nothing improved his condition. It became evident that Herman needed medical attention. With no other option, Heno reluctantly prepared their truck and set out for Windhoek. Navigating the treacherous terrain, they eventually reached the town. After dropping Herman off for treatment, Heno returned to the desert with Otto. However, Herman, persuaded by friends, revealed Heno's location to the authorities. Soon, Heno was apprehended. Both men were briefly imprisoned, but were quickly transferred to a hospital where Herman began to recover. His illness was diagnosed as a severe vitamin B deficiency. When they faced trial, the charges against them ranged from desertion to minor infractions, like failing to pay for a dog license. Their extraordinary tale of survival earned them leniency, and they were fined lightly. The aftermath was bittersweet. Herman recovered fully, but tragically died in a car accident in 1946. Otto, their steadfast companion, disappeared mysteriously a few years later. Heno Martin, however, remained in Namibia, where he wrote The Sheltering Desert, chronicling their extraordinary 2.5-year struggle for survival. If you enjoyed this story, please give this video a like and subscribe to my channel for more amazing tales of survival, adventure, and history. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What would you have done differently if you were in their situation? Do you think you could survive in the desert for 2.5 years? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.